Lately, NXIVM has been a pretty popular topic to cover, and with good reason. Keith Raniere, the leader and founder, was just sentenced to 120 years in prison for crimes he's committed since starting the organization back in 1998. We'll be getting into all of that shortly, though. First, what is NXIVM? Clearly, we aren't talking about the acid reflux medication. NXIVM is an MLM, or multi-level marketing company, whose products are personal growth seminars. On the surface, it looks and sounds like your average MLM. A cult-like following that ignores any and all red flags, a focus on being happy and living your best life, and a founder that's already been accused of owning and operating a pyramid scheme in the past. They call their programs executive success programs, which focus on self-improvement. And this model isn't anything new. Beachbody, Landmark, Leverage Group, and some other MLMs also follow this model. So, what makes NXIVM so different? Most MLMs do use cult-like practices to attract and keep members, and NXIVM isn't different in this regard. Like cults, recruiters will lie and withhold information to attract new members, and the authorities within these organizations don't accept questions about their behavior, and they don't take criticism. MLMs use manipulation to place blame on the members, capitalizing on the struggles of those that are often already in really vulnerable positions. They, like cults, present joining their organization as a sort of panacea. If you're lonely, you'll have friends in this group. If you need money, look at how much you'll make. If you feel like a failure, you're guaranteed to succeed with us. Their entire business model is built on predation, isolation, and reaffirming the belief that everyone outside of their circle hates you. The higher-ups in these organizations take no accountability for these broken promises, placing full blame on the members for not working hard enough and not doing enough for the company. They're told that leaving isn't a viable option. After all, leaving means losing friends and the community and network they'd bought into. Leaving, in short, means exile. Staying, they tell them, will guarantee them the future prizes, bonuses, and promotions they'd been promised at the start. Of course, this never comes to fruition, and the cycle repeats. NXIVM, like I said, used these same practices to attract the following it has today. But unlike other MLMs, NXIVM has a darker side, one that most other MLMs don't. Keith Raniere, like most cult leaders, considers himself something like a genius. He says he was speaking in full sentences at 1 year old, taught himself high school math in 19 hours and concert piano at the age of 12, and had studied 3 years of college math and knew several computer languages by the age of 13. He made grand claims of starting his MLMs after noticing that people were constantly taking on jobs they disliked, and he wanted to change that. In 1997, after several attempts at other MLMs that were ended in court cases, Raniere met Nancy Salzman, who would become his prefect, or second in command. Like I said, Raniere has gone through many court cases over the years, several on his ownership and operation of illegal pyramid schemes in the state of New York, and one covering bankruptcy. During this bankruptcy case, it was revealed that Raniere had been threatening and intimidating his ex-girlfriend, Tony Natalie, and her family. During this case, both Salzman and Raniere made claims that Natalie had altered court documents, but this accusation was never confirmed. The judge presiding over the case also didn't seem to believe it. This case still wasn't enough to reveal exactly what Keith Raniere is like, and it isn't even the most influential case related to NXIVM. In 2003, NXIVM sued the Ross Institute for copyright infringement. Up until this point, NXIVM's training process and its manual had been a secret, one kept safe with non-disclosure agreements. Then, a cult investigator named Rick Allen Ross published a psychiatrist's assessment of this manual on his website. The case ended up being dismissed multiple times in several courts and states, with the judges affirming each time that the use of the manual, even if it had been acquired in bad faith, was transformative and a critique, therefore falling under fair use. Later in the year, Forbes posted an article titled Cult of Personality, part scathing criticism of Raniere's business practices, part analysis of the statements made by detractors, and part discussion of the published critique by Ross. So now we have a cult leader and his second in command, a handful of court cases, several accusations of a cult, and one MLM. But what are these seminars, and how does this all connect back to the cult that's been in the news? It all begins with NXIVM's executive success programs, which are, at their core, a pseudo-self-help program. I don't want to call them self-help programs, and I won't. What they are is more like an indoctrination into this group. Most former members of NXIVM have claimed that these programs are used to basically hypnotize potential members, drawing them further into the group. They focus on things like ethics and values, covering topics like money, independence, and spirituality. One is even titled Control, Freedom, and Surrender. The students are encouraged to take these courses several times, much like members of Scientology are encouraged to repeatedly purchase the works of L. Ron Hubbard, and they likely pay more than some college students in tuition to do so. One couple even claimed that they had paid over $300,000 to take and retake these seminars. Rainier's teaching method was deliberate and covertly manipulative. He used terms like parasite and suppressive to differentiate between the good people, or members of NXIVM, and the bad people, or the critics and those outside of it. Rainier and Salzman said that they avoided those they considered troubled, people that questioned Rainier's views or just didn't understand them. Rainier even spoke in a particular manner, his students said, slowly, making sure to define every word he had created a definition for within the context of NXIVM. The entire point was to convince people to join, and, more importantly, to plant the seeds for an us versus them mentality. And for many, it worked. Rainier's model attracted, in some ways, the wealthy and famous, such as actress Sarah Edmondson, Smallville's Allison Mack, Battlestar Galactica's Grace Park and Nikki Klein, and Sarah and Claire Bronfman, the daughters of former Seagram's chairman Edgar Bronfman. Those are just the confirmed members. There is some speculation that there are others, but to my knowledge, none have currently confirmed or denied the rumors. For that reason, I won't be including their names here. Many of the aforementioned people have faced NXIVM-related court cases as well over the last decade, notably Sarah and Claire Bronfman, who had even made false claims of an extortion letter in a case in 2010. It was also in this year, 2010, that, like Scientology, NXIVM was exposed for following and threatening its critics. Even Edgar Bronfman, the father of Claire and Sarah Bronfman, was not immune to this. He was blamed for NXIVM's losses and failures despite being openly critical of the organization and of his daughter's involvement. His daughters would go on to use their fortunes to fund NXIVM, even going so far as to sell their properties and some of their possessions to do so. The Bronfman sisters, like Salzman, Allison Mack, and Nikki Klein, would end up becoming some of the highest-ranking officials in NXIVM, though the pair would later be criticized by members for paying their way to the top rather than getting there through hard work. In 2017, the cult allegations came out once again, this time featuring a different accusation, one of a secret sisterhood or sorority within NXIVM called DOS, or The Vow, which was advertised as being made to empower women. In reality, it was very far from that. Members of this sorority were branded, a process lasting 20 to 30 minutes without anesthesia. Many were encouraged to follow near-starvation diets and were told that they must remain under 100 pounds to please Rainier, who often assaulted the women in this group. Later, reports would be made to the New York Department of Health on these things, but Danielle Roberts, the doctor who performed the brandings, and Brandon Porter, the doctor who recorded the responses and reactions of women he forced to watch violent clips, were not investigated because, according to the state, neither had committed medical malpractice. Rainier and Salzman weren't looking to empower women, if that wasn't obvious enough. Rainier taught that women were overly emotional by nature, enjoyed playing the victim, and often failed to keep promises. The method to overcome those inherent flaws was total submission and obedience. Within the sorority, there were these groups called circles, made up of 6 women, called slaves, led by someone called a master. Part of the requirements involved sending compromising collateral, including nude photographs and videos, to a Dropbox account once a month. This group had been hidden from the public eye, and most members of NXIVM didn't know what was happening within this sorority, or, in some cases, supposedly didn't know that it existed. It was Anthony Ames and Sarah Edmondson, as well as a man that had previously been involved in a series of lawsuits against the Bronfmans and Rainier, that made this information public. Once this happened, women in the sorority were ordered to delete messages and Google documents. After the accusations came out, Rainier fled to a villa he owned in Mexico, where he was arrested in 2018. In June of 2019, Rainier was convicted of charges that included forced labor conspiracy, wire fraud conspiracy, racketeering, identity theft, and a number of crimes involving the aforementioned sorority as well as CSE. In October of this year, Rainier was sentenced to 120 years in prison. Along with him, 5 women, including Allison Mack and Claire Bronfman, were charged with varying crimes, though most are still awaiting their sentencing. Even after his conviction, in spite of everything he's done, Rainier has still Even after his conviction, in spite of everything he's done, Rainier still has loyal supporters. Many wrote letters pleading leniency to the judge presiding over his case last year and this year. The ones that have spoken out told the New York Times that they're reviewing trial evidence and keeping an open mind, though it isn't a stretch to assume they won't be revoking their support of NXIVM or denouncing Rainier anytime soon. For many, NXIVM is distant enough that it isn't a concern, and most people don't have that money to shell out on self-help programs anyway. However, NXIVM isn't the only cult out there, and even intelligent, rational people can be pulled into them. It's important to remember that these people aren't stupid. They're typically just in a very difficult place in life, and these groups prey on those that are down on their luck and struggling. They are dishonest from the start and capitalized on the low self-esteem and fears of those they recruit. Remember that if they don't take accountability, don't accept questions or criticism, claim to have all the answers, and paint defectors as evil or wrong, they're likely not a safe group to interact with. Rainier and others like him can only push their agenda by erasing the identity and autonomy of others. If a group truly cares about you and your well-being, they will listen, they will answer your questions and disclose information that may be important to you to know, and they will encourage autonomy, individuality, and critical thinking. These groups do often seem harmless, but they're not. Take care of yourselves and stay safe.